my name is Sandy Carter, and I'm Amazon Web Services Vice President for Public Sector Partners, Startups, and Programs. I am so excited to be here today for our very first Build Her event. Welcome to the first inaugural event. It won't be our last, but we wanted to do this to help our founders and our entrepreneurs and those who are looking to be entrepreneurs be successful. Now, I know that it's been kind of rough with all the things going on in the quote unquote new normal, right? And sometimes we don't know, do we work at home or do we live at work? So I'm so grateful that you took time out of your day today to do yet another video conference, but this one will be different. You will have lots of actionable items to take away. You will be inspired and you will see how AWS can help you either take that startup step, continue it, grow it, be successful, scale it, you name it. You will also make some great connections and network as well. So thank you again for joining us. And I'm hoping that you're safe and healthy as we go through today's event. So get ready, hang on to your seat, because here we go. Now, this is what you're going to hear about today. First, fundraising. And fundraising is so important. Melissa Bradley will take us through the fundamentals of fundraising. This is important. Ladies, did you know that female founders are 15% more profitable, but are 40% less likely to get funding? Next, we'll go to Confessions of an Entrepreneur. And I am pleased to have Teresa here from Salesforce. She's going to take you through some lessons learned. And then, of course, we'll have our very own Leah Hay, who will take you through tools and resources so that you can build your startup in public sector. I think this is a dynamite agenda, and we'll provide you some very actionable things that you can take away for your business. Now, hold on to your seat as well, because we have an amazing closer as well. Teresa Carlson, who is a legend in public sector. She's inspirational. She is one of the women in public sector, and she's going to do a fireside chat. You won't want to miss those lessons learned either. Very dynamic, very practical, and very actionable too. So let's go ahead and jump in. I'm going to do a little prelude to the day's event just to get you excited. Hopefully you're energized, right? Can I hear you? You're ready to go, because we broke all kinds of records over the last year. There's more to do though, but I just wanted you to see some of the progress that we have made together. Women are founding more startups than ever before. In fact, we had 21 female-funded unicorns. We had firms owned by African-American women that grew by 164%, and venture capital firms, very important element, grew and added 52 women partners. Now, I think that that's pretty incredible. And I love this factoid too. More than 1 in 3 new businesses were started by those over the age of 50. So not only did we have more founders, but we have more diversity in those that are founding different companies. Now let's take a look at VC investment, because that's also very crucial. So 20% of global startups raised their first raising efforts. They had a female founder, and that doubled since 2019. I know that you're probably thinking 20% isn't great, but it's better. It's a double than what we had. And then female-only founded companies raised 3% of venture dollars, and females and male co-founded raised 9% of venture dollars. Again, more to do. That's why we've got a whole session on fundraising. And then last but not least, if we look at the global state of women entrepreneurs, globally, the total entrepreneurship activity for women is 10%, which is about 3/4 of that seen for men. More to do. But the average for women's intentions to start a business, and I know there's probably some of you today in the audience that are like, I might do it within the next 3 years, is 17+%. And the highest rates of women entrepreneurs' intentions are in the Middle East, which is amazing. So these are some stats that have some good news to them, but much more to do. And that's why we're here today. That's why we're doing Builder. We want to have a class of the next round of female founders that will completely change the world. Now, I love this factoid from McKinsey Global Institute. I only have it for the US, but did you know that women entrepreneurs could increase the United States GDP by $30 billion? We are counting on you, and we are going to help you as well. So how can AWS help? Well, I think there's three things I'd like to chat about today. One, we understand startups. Two, we enable innovation. And you know that startups are successful because they innovate. They solve a problem. And three, we have programs that we've set up to help you out. So let me show you how by going through each of these three areas. So first, we understand startups. And you know what we do at Amazon? Think about it. We were founded as a startup 24 years ago. Yes, that's Jeff Bezos at his desk. And check out that desk. It is actually a door. My first desk at Amazon was a door as well. I didn't know why until they told me the story of how when Jeff Bezos started Amazon in his garage, he used a door for a desk. It's those kind of traditions that are amazing, and it shows you that Amazon was a startup. Now, it's really interesting because when I came to Amazon, I had been a startup myself, a startup founder myself. Everyone was like, oh my gosh, you're going to Amazon. It's this huge company. But Amazon has kept the spirit and the DNA of a startup. We do these small 2-pizza teams. So in essence, you've got a bunch of startups that are funded by AWS or Amazon Web Services. Now, another interesting factoid is that mentors are a big indicator of success. If you look at this survey, it shows that companies or startups who were founded and were mentored by a top ranking entrepreneur, they were 33% more successful than all other companies. And so that's another thing that we can bring to the party. Wait till you check out Manpreet and his team. He has a dedicated team of people who have exited startups as founders. They've been former investors. They've been startup executives. They know the space. I myself, I told you, was a female founder. I had my own startup in Silicon Valley for about a year. We also work very closely with the venture capital firms, the accelerators, the incubators. So take, for instance, Capital Factory down in Austin, Texas with Joshua Baer. We partner very closely with them as well as others around the world, too numerous to mention today. So we understand you. We know what it takes. We have the people to mentor you, and we're committed to you and your success. Now, one of the ways that we can help you be successful is through innovation. And you know, Amazon is known for innovation. In fact, one of the reasons I came to Amazon was I felt that I could learn so many mechanisms by seeing how Amazon innovates. What was their secret sauce? How do they do it? And so we share that with you. And one of the big secrets of success is AWS, is our cloud technology. That cloud technology really enables you to get up and going quickly. If your startup has anything to do with technology, and I'm sure that it does, we can help you launch faster. We can help you experiment at less cost. I know when I had my startup, we would try something out and then, we'd pivot and then pivot again and pivot again. And with zero upfront cost, it was very easy to try those different directions out. Also, AWS does focus on our core business value too. So it's not just about technology, but it's about business and technology and that integration that you see of them together. Now, if you think about it, our pace of innovation is phenomenal. I'm not just saying that though, because I want to brag about AWS. I'm saying that because this pace of innovation benefits you directly. Because we are innovating with a lot of this infrastructure, it means that you can focus on what you do best, which is that subject matter expertise that sets your business apart. So you can take advantage of all that innovation. You can innovate like Amazon as you adopt a lot of our technology that can help you grow. And if you look at it, it's fascinating to me because if you look, if you started a business in 2005, you would have had to have $500,000 just for technology. In 2019, which are the latest numbers we have, you would only need $5,000. So as you're getting that funding, whether you're bootstrapped or you have angel investors, or whether you're on to your Series A or B, you can now spend less on technology, something that makes you so competitive and so differentiated, and you can move really quick because of that. Now, I don't want to bore you with all of the details, but I do want to call out some of the services in our offering that a lot of startups do begin with. So take, for instance, Amazon Lightsail. Well, what is Lightsail? Well, Lightsail is a light version of Amazon. So if you're not overly technical and you don't need all the capabilities yet, but you want to grow into Amazon Web Services, Lightsail is a great place to start. It hides a lot of that configuration and provisioning from you. If you are a startup focused on AR and VR, augmented reality and virtual reality, you may want to try out this service, Amazon Cerulean, because it really helps you to get a quick start in that space. Or analytics, we learned that data was so important during the pandemic. Amazon Kinesis can help you do some of that analytics. And then last but not least, of course, one of my very favorites, because I've done machine learning and AI for so long, is Amazon SageMaker as well. These are just some of the offerings that I would say, hey, explore these, because these are the top ones that we're seeing entrepreneurs today adopt. So if I take a look at one of those entrepreneurs, which is Force Therapeutics, they have been working with Amazon, and one of the things that they wanted to do is to enable their remote healthcare access. And in order to provide that service for their clients, they decided that predictive analytics would be most valuable, would provide the most value to their customers. And so they were able to use Amazon SageMaker, that machine learning product I just talked to you about on that last page, in order to train their learning models, do that in a managed service way to provide that extreme value to their customers. We also have the largest community of builders that's out there today, and this is also important. So when you get big enough to have a technical team, or if you are a technical team, you can join us in communities of builders around the world. And many of the startups that build on AWS, face it, we're all a community of builders, right? We're building something. That's why we're here with AWS. It's really interesting to share stories and learn what others are building as well. So our third and final area are some of the programs that we built specifically for you. We built them for your growth and for you to continue on the path that you're on today. So for example, one of my very favorites, and I know one of a lot of our entrepreneurs' favorites too, is called AWS Activate. Now, what is Activate? Well, it provides you with credits so that you can go ahead and get started with AWS. So let's say you want to experiment with it for a while because you are a startup. You may be bootstrapped or you may just be beginning. We provide you with a way to get started really easily with credits to pay for the use of AWS on demand. We also work with you on a business support plan. We've got some self-paced labs to teach you about what the technology can do and the power that it brings. Do you know today that over 90% of startups depend on technology as their competitive advantage? So having access to technical resources, especially as a startup, is so very powerful. We also offer office hours, and we spotlight a lot of our startups as well. I know you're going to want to take advantage of this program. I have the URL down there at the bottom, so make sure that you check that out and really register for your promotional credits as well. Now, we've got all kinds of startups today using and leveraging these credits. I want to talk about one in particular, which is Hello Alice. And the reason I bring Hello Alice up is not only is Hello Alice a startup for us, but they help other startups. So Hello Alice was started by Carolyn Pond and Elizabeth Gore. And what they wanted to do is to have Hello Alice, which is a machine learning based on SageMaker way to assist startups through anything that's really complicated. So for example, they're being built on AWS. They set up a way that you could figure out how to use the CARES Act during this pandemic or post-pandemic. Additionally, they've started programs for Black entrepreneurs, Brown entrepreneurs, veteran-owned entrepreneurs, female founders. So they have so much to offer being built on us. Now you can see some other amazing names on here too that started with us: Stripe, 23andMe, DoorDash. They started just like you did with those Activate credits, getting going, getting moving around this particular space. Another thing that you'll want to take a look at is our AWS Partner Network. You'll hear it called a lot APN, the AWS Partner Network. Now, why is this really valuable? Well, once you become a partner with AWS, there is a lot of additional help and assistance that you get. For example, go-to-market help and support, building that plan out, building your own AWS expertise, access to funding and customer leads. As you go up in the different levels, you get more and more value from that program. For example, we have a program specifically for public sector called ATO, Authority to Operate. And what that program does is it enables a partner to get help becoming FedRamped. So if you don't know what FedRamped is, if you're going to sell into the government, FedRamped is that added layer of security that's a certification from the government. We've helped partners around the country become FedRamped in half the time. And today we have about 3 times the number of FedRamped solutions running on AWS than our next 2 cloud vendors combined. So that's just one example of some of the benefits that you'll get to take advantage of for being part of our partner network. Let me just give you another example of a startup that we've been working with. And I love this one because it's a partner working with a startup. So we have eWater and SI. And SI is it's a very interesting solution. First of all, it has a lot of purpose, which we love, of course. In places in Africa, there is not clean, fresh water. But a lot of times when someone came into villages in Africa to set up a facility like this to provide clean water, the maintenance would become an issue. So being able to service that system, being able to know when I need to send someone out to a very remote area becomes problematic. And so most water solutions were only lasting a year or maybe 2 years. So enter eWater and SI. They came in with an interesting solution. They built the whole thing around the community. That's why I call it the economy of water. So they sold credits at local community stores. As you got your credit, you would take your mobile phone or your mobile device, and you would use those credits to purchase the water. Now, that sets up kind of everybody to take advantage of this water system and to get some benefit from it. But in addition, they have IoT sensors. They're built on AWS, of course. They have IoT sensors. And so those IoT sensors not only trigger when the water can come out from your mobile credits, but also to signal when maintenance really needs to come out or when the remote maintenance could be done. It's a great example of how we're helping startups around the world, not just here in the United States, but in Asia Pacific, Japan, Latin America, Canada, Europe, including EMEA, which is Middle East and Africa as well. We have startups from all over the globe. In fact, you'll hear about one of those startup ecosystems for Bahrain when you hear Teresa Carlson in her fireside chat today as well. So as you're thinking about this, we've also started a pilot that's really specific for all of us today. It's called Think Big for Small Business. It is new and it's just been opened up, but it's been going gangbusters. It's really targeted for SMEs or small and medium businesses. What we're seeing is a lot of veteran-owned, Black-owned, Brown-owned, female-owned businesses working as they become part of that Amazon Partner Network to get benefits at a higher level. They're using this particular program to get extra help that they would need to move up that ladder, if you would, and also to make sure that they are keeping that extra premier tier status or advanced tier status as they move forward. If you're interested in this pilot, please follow the email link down there. Email us and help us get you as part of this particular program. So how can AWS help you? Well, first, we understand startups. We were a startup. I was a startup, and I have a whole team of people who used to be startups and funders and part of VCs. We do enable technology and innovation through that technology. Based on the cloud, we can really help you accelerate your journey. And finally, last but not least, we have a whole set of programs from Think Big to Small Business to AWS Activate that can help you really tackle the challenges that you see today. Because here's what we want to do. We want to change the game together. We want to be part of your success, part of what you're doing, and part of where you are going. We want to help build her as our first inaugural event. I want to thank you for your time today. Again, I know you've got lots of choices that you could do today. And I'm so excited that you came here and spend the time with us. We want to improve this because, like I said, this is our inaugural event, but we will have more. So please provide us feedback. You can reach me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, or you can email me as well. I'm always available to help another fellow female founder. So let's go ahead and get started with the event today. Let's go ahead and kick off Build Her.
Hi, my name is Melissa Bradley, and I am founder and managing director of 1863 Ventures. As a finance major, this is probably the most exciting thing that I can talk about, which is fundraising essentials. As many entrepreneurs know, being able to secure capital is one of the most exciting, but oftentimes one of the most challenging. So I hope that you find this conversation to be helpful to you. Now, we know that there's different words at different stages of being able to finance your business, but the first thing is let's just put this in context of a timeline. The reality is that if you were trying to raise a highly scalable, multi-million, billion-dollar business, it's going to take a lot of capital. And unfortunately, even if you're just trying to run a couple of $100,000 or $1 million business, it's still going to take some capital. And part of what we want to discuss today is what does it take to raise money at different stages? But most importantly, what is it that investors are looking for in this process? So here's a typical timeline, and you can find yourself anywhere on here. But the reality is that whether you're starting a lifestyle business or you're going for a multi-billion-dollar tech company, at the end of the day, investors care about one thing. Will this business be successful so that I can generate a return? Now, in making that decision, there's lots of different things that investors have to be able to discern. But there's also a lot of different things that entrepreneurs have to discern because there's so many different types of capital. Now, legally and regulated, there's debt and equity, but there's so many different types of debt, from traditional debt to revenue-based financing to royalty financing, and there's venture capital and there's private equity and lots of things in between. And so the biggest lesson that I hope you take away from this is that on your fundraising journey, you could get a combination of all of those because there is no one correct pathway for any entrepreneur in their journey. Particularly these days, we have entrepreneurs who have been venture-backed, but because the situation has changed with COVID-19 and so many other things, people are looking at alternative ways to be able to find funding, and they're going to traditional debt investors. They're looking for lines of credit, you name it, because the world has changed considerably. And so this big takeaway here is that you need to find your correct timeline and your correct trajectory. Starting with angels does not automatically mean you go to VCs, and starting with VCs does not mean you have to stay on this track. The beauty is there are lots of options for entrepreneurs, and even better, more and more beginning to come to market. So obviously, as you think about this journey, there's probably a bunch of questions running through your mind, but here's just some basic questions that I can safely say, having been an investor and still currently an angel investor, things that we ask for. Not just what is the product or service, but do we understand it? Do we understand its application? As I've mentioned, do we understand what the exit strategy is? Which doesn't mean you go public, but just how, as I an investor, can I exit? How can I get my money back? We certainly want to be mindful of how fast you're burning through money or spending money on a regular basis, because that's a good indicator of how much more of my money or another investor's money are you actually going to need. The one that's obviously going to be most important investor is that who are the customers, how fast are they growing, but most importantly, how well do you understand your customers? Because at the end of the day, the only way your business is going to drive revenue is understanding your customers. Now, I say that because I find that so many entrepreneurs oftentimes spend more time focusing on investors or more time focusing on suppliers and not enough time on customers. So we're going to dig into that today. But it's helpful for you to get a sense of what are some of the questions that investors are going to ask of you. And don't let these scare you, because the bottom line is this is not an inquisition, but it is a conversation. And most importantly, if you don't have all the answers, then say you don't know. Particularly if you're early in your entrepreneurial journey, it's okay. We know that you're just starting. And so where you don't have an answer, don't panic. But what is going to be important to be able to tell folks like myself is, how will you get the answer? Entrepreneurship is less about executing a specific pathway. It is about managing multiple pathways in a world of imperfect data. And that's really what we're counting on as investors. Do we trust you to be able to make good decisions? So what do we look for in a very traditional sense of investors? Well, one is that we want to know you have a viable product that has a real competitive advantage. What is it about your product that has people going crazy? And not just going crazy one time, has them going crazy coming back over and over again. And how big is that market? Are there a couple of hundred customers, a couple of thousand customers, or millions of customers that can really get excited about what it is you're providing? And then where I want to spend a little bit of time is on this concept of scalable business. Scalable does not mean I'm getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And too often times that definition is just conflated. Scale means that you have the ability to produce a greater output at a lower cost than before. Scale is when you can go from making hundreds to making thousands and have a significant decrease in the cost of that. It is a consistent reduction of cost of input for every single output that you create. So let that sit in for a second. Scale doesn't mean you're going to be as big as possible, because big as possible, as we've seen, could mean that you actually go bankrupt because you have not been able to manage your expenses. So scale is about being able to reduce your expenses while you're creating more outputs. And that's what investors are looking for. Now, that's a little challenging, as we see, because we're certainly not seeing all the successes that many investors thought they would. But that's what we're looking for, an efficient use of our investment dollars to grow the business within a very large market. So what do we look for? We look for market. We look for a business model. How do all the pieces come together between partners and customers and investors and finances and employees and distribution channels so that you're actually running a successful business? We also look at you and the team. We want to know your capacity. We want to know the people that work with you. And before you say, well, I can't afford anybody just yet, that's okay. When we say team, we mean those who actually work for you and those who support you. Who's on your advisory board? Who's on your board of directors? Who are your mentors or coaches? Who are the folks that are volunteering with you? That's your team. And we want to know who those people are, just to know that, hey, entrepreneurship could be a lonely journey and we all need some help at some point in time. And then one of the most important things we're looking for is, what is the progress or traction you've made to date? But also, what have you learned about that progress and traction so that it can continue over time? Now, I want to dig a little bit deeper because the reality is investors actually care more about what you say and what you're doing than about the numbers you're going to put on a piece of paper. And oftentimes people don't know that. We want to know that there's real customers who are going to come back over and over and over again, which means that you understand your market. As I've mentioned before, we want to make sure there's a competitive advantage that makes your product stand out from somebody else's. And then obviously we want to make sure there's some kind of scalable revenue. So I want to go deep into each of these so that you walk away with a real understanding of what the heck is going on inside the mind of an investor every time you pitch or every time you talk about your business. So the first thing is understanding your customers. Now you may say, well, my customer is 25 to 35 and they make $85,000 a year and they have no kids, but they have 2 cats. That's wonderful. But that tells me just who they are as people. That doesn't tell me why they're spending money with your business. So the most important part here is not just being able to describe them and draw them so I get a visual of what they look like. I'm really less concerned about their demographics. I'm much more concerned about how they spend their money and what about your business is exciting to them. So you really want to know what is driving value for your customers because, again, I want to make sure they come back over and over and over again, which means you got to talk to them. You got to survey them. You got to get to know them beyond just an archetype, but you've got to understand their spending patterns and what's important to them. And I think too often entrepreneurs say, well, here's my customer and keep on going. But I guarantee you at least 80% of the time in running a business should be spent on understanding your customer because without them, there is no business. The next thing is being able to define your competitive advantage. And what that means is, what do you do better on a consistent and sustainable basis than your competitor that still drives value from your customers? It's not just, what do I do differently? It's what do you do differently that allows customers to come to you versus your competitor? And there's lots of ways that you can accomplish this, but I'm going to focus on 7 of them. The first is cost leadership. Now, this is not surprising, right? All kinds of people live in the discount world or the low-cost world, and that may or may not work for you. I'm just giving you options. But one thing to think about is this an opportunity for your product or service to lead from a cost perspective? That you are the cheapest in the marketplace, which we know has some value. Or maybe not you're consistently the cheapest in the market, but as you may have one product, and then you create another product and another product. As those initial products go through the growth curve from early adopters to later stage, is that where you continue to gain some leadership because you drop your cost over time and not at the onset? But recognizing that there is a very large consumer base that is price sensitive. So that's one option for you to maintain your competitive advantage. The second is differentiation. Now we know branding is one way that places like Rolex, where they're the high-end watchmaker, or Nike, where they're for athletes, even if you're your own athlete in your own mind. We know that there's water that's been differentiated. We know that phones are differentiated. We know that hair products, wellness products, all those things have differentiation. And so part of being able to own your competitive advantage is being able to clearly articulate to your customers through your branding and marketing efforts, why are you different? And so when they pick it up, they know. If anybody's familiar with Shinola watch, that is a watch that is made in America that helped literally revitalize Detroit by taking former auto workers and teaching them how to work at a dramatically reduced scale to make American-made watches. And so there's a sense of craftsmanship and American pride that goes into that. And that has a huge customer base that now, as they've branched off to other products, from watches to basketballs to bikes to journals, people know that when I buy this product, I'm contributing to that community. Another way to think about this is innovation. And let me be really clear, innovation does not have to equal technology. Innovation is just doing something different that allows for some improved outputs or reduced cost of inputs, but either way, that innovation leads to a competitive advantage. And so think about in your space, what in your supply chain, what in your process of production, what in the use of that product can be innovative that cuts time in terms of delivery, that cuts cost in terms of production, or creates some massive incentive for customers to use your product over somebody else's because it allows them to improve and advance their life. Now, something that is important regardless. And I should say that these 7 are not mutually exclusive, but operational effectiveness is critical. As the head of your company, as the CEO, what can you be doing internally to constantly make your systems better? How do you reduce friction to be able to deliver your product or service to the marketplace? And so it's extremely important that you're constantly looking at data and you have a dashboard that tells you how are things going in the business, and you're consistently looking for ways to improve how products get delivered, how staff communications are done, how fast your product gets to market. Whatever it is, all of that falls into the bucket of operational effectiveness. Now, technology. And this doesn't mean you have to go out and become a tech company, but there may be things that you can do that can be tech enabled. It could be that who wants to sit on the phone anymore and wait for customer service? You're leveraging technology for customer feedback, and customers can text you if there's a problem. That's leveraging technology. It could be that you have some kind of customer response or customer service system that's based on AI. Based on all the questions that have come in before, you now are able to deliver customer service faster. It could be if you're producing a product, you now have integrated technology into it. It could be as simple as you have moved your paper customer receipts to a customer relationship management system in CRM, and boom, all of a sudden you have access to your customer data so much quicker and so much easier. But really thinking about where can I leverage technology to improve my operations? Something that I think probably all of us are mastering right now is adaptability. How can I respond to what's happening in the marketplace? We've seen in COVID-19, people have gone from providing support in person to now delivering services online. So just constantly, not just in a crisis, thinking about how can I adapt better to be able to respond to my customers as well as respond to the needs of those who work with me. And then the last thing is information. One of the things that makes entrepreneurs so unique is that we live in a world of imperfect information. We have data coming from all over about our customers, about our suppliers, about our partners, about our competitors, about the macro environment, about the economy, you name it. It can be exhausting. So you need to figure out how do you take all that information and process what is relevant to you, which could mean you stop subscribing to some things, or it could mean that you need to really focus on what is the types of information that you need to be able to effectively run your business. And that's really where you should be headed. Thinking about what are the data sources that you're using from outside, publications, people, conferences, convenings, you name research, and what is the information inside that you need. And you heard me earlier talk about a CEO dashboard. Highly recommended. It could have 3 things or 30 things, whatever works for you. I'd say pick something in between, but it could be number of monthly customers, number of monthly returns if you happen to have a product, customer satisfaction or net promoter score, number of staff, whatever it is that you can quickly have the information you need to make those decisions, because that's really what the role of a CEO is. There's this balance of management and leadership. And you as a CEO have to figure out how much time am I managing operations and managing people and really working within the business, and how much time am I leading and really have an external focus of creating strategy and looking at how do I really concretize my spot in the marketplace so that I can become a highly successful business. Now, the last piece, the third pillar in this stool, so to speak, is how do you develop scalable revenue models? This is an amazing thing to make sure you can clearly articulate to investors, because we want to know how's this going to scale and how's this going to make money. And so it's important that we go back to the basics. The best thing that ever happened to me was a business model canvas, because that's essentially, as a CEO, you have to manage all of these competing pieces and parts that you have to figure out how do they fit nicely together so that I can have a scalable business. And so being able to constantly on a monthly, maybe quarterly, but I would suggest monthly basis, really take the time to sit back and reassess, how is all of this working? How is the business model coming together? How are my customers' demands being met by my distribution channels? Do I have the most effective distribution channels? And how is all of that funneling down to the bottom line? So hopefully this looks familiar to you. A business model canvas, as I said, at least once a month is what I'd recommend. But if you don't have the time, nothing less than quarterly. You take a look at this and you look at the one before and the one before, and you build one for now and you build one for the next quarter or next month after. This is the stuff that every single CEO should be focused on, because when you stand in front of an investor and you say, I'm going to make $1 million, it's not that we don't believe you. When we say how, and we may seem skeptical, it's that we want to know not how you're going to do it because we don't believe you, but how are you going to leverage these components of your business to actually get to $1 million. And so it's very rare that you're going to find an investor who's going to say, well, how are you going to get to $1 million, and expect you to literally go through the quantifying exercise of how many units are you going to sell and how many customers that take. Nothing personal, but we don't care about that. Only because we're probably not 100% convinced that that's going to happen. What we do know is that that is an output of how many customers and how many units. But the inputs are going to be, how many units do you have to sell? Are your partners ready to go? Are your distribution channels even open and trained how to sell your product? Do you have customers that you have actually met their needs? That's what we want to know. And so this business model canvas, whether you literally carry it around with you, you have the pieces in your mind, the successful entrepreneur knows how to move and manage and where to go in and where to take a step back on all of these components to a business. So that when we say, well, how are you going to get to $1 million? We don't want the mathematical calculation. We want to know how you are aware of your customers and all the other factors that get that product to market, and how you're managing the effective use of every single one of these resources to be able to generate $1 million or maybe even more. So when we think about how to use that business model canvas, and you want to talk about scale and growth, there's a couple of ways you can do that. You can create new distribution channels. So when you're pitching to an investor, you can say, I'm going to grow by going from 1 store to 5 stores. I'm going to grow from going my own website to Amazon to a bunch of retail stores. I'm going to move my stuff from offline and my own site because I'm spending way too much money on e-commerce there, and I'm going to use an existing platform like Amazon. We want to know how you're going to reduce that friction between your amazing product with a competitive advantage and how your customer can access it when they want it, how they want it, and at the right price. We also want to know how you're going to manage constraints, because being involved in this ecosystem of entrepreneurship, you're going to be relying on a lot of people. And if you're in the service business, you're going to be relying possibly on other team members. If you're in the product business, you're going to be relying on a bunch of manufacturers. And everybody's going to have some kind of constraint: time, money, space, you name it. And so how are you going to manage when things start to slow down and friction rises? And how are you going to manage these capacity constraints? And guess what? We don't want to hear you're going to take on more money. Money is a means to an end. So we want to know how those dollars are going to be deployed to kind of break open all the roadblocks that may be in your way. So that's also something that we're looking for as investors. And the other thing is we're trying to think about, as you achieve that scale, how are you going to reduce your costs? Remember, scale is greater output with reduced cost of input. So how are you going to reduce those costs? And some of that we can say, well, I'm going to buy more units, because we know there's this concept of unit economic cost. And if you're able to buy more from somewhere else, it goes down. But that's just one way. There are other ways. One way to think about it is, how do I shift the cost to somebody else, to a partner? And I gave an example earlier. You could have been selling all the products on your own website, and you could have been running an amazing e-commerce platform, but the fulfillment and all that stuff just was too much for you. And you were losing time, and it was taking longer, and your customers were getting unhappy. But instead you said, let me shift that to Amazon. Let me shift that to somebody else. Let somebody else distribute your product. And that begins to relieve some of the capacity constraints of your team and of your website and of your mind share, and let somebody else do it. So really thinking about, how do you build your own ecosystem for your business to not just survive, but also thrive? And maybe not just leveraging partners from a shifting capital, but leveraging them from a distribution perspective, leveraging them from helping to get you more customers, but recognizing that running a business is not you operating in isolation. You are truly part of a system. And then as some people may know, these whole world of platforms of Uber and Airbnb and a whole bunch of stuff have come on board. And that's one type of platform. But thinking about how can you leverage a platform? Are there other ecosystems that you want to plug in to be able to give visibility to your product or service? And more importantly, to give distribution access to your product or service. And so you want to think about, how can I use other platforms? How can I use people that I may have thought to be competitors who actually can turn out to be partners? And this is where you really want to be clear. Who are your competitors? Your competitors, let me be really clear, are not just the people who are producing the same exact widget as you. Your competitors is anybody who's vying for the wallet share of your customers, which is why it's important to know more than their 25 to 35 two cats and making $85,000. You want to know where they're spending their money. You want to know what platforms they're using to deliver their products and services, that you can be a part of that. And so just really understanding your customers helps you think about, what are other partners and what are other platforms that I can attract their attention and gain their wallet share. And so as you begin to think about, how do I develop a scalable business, you begin to see that really understanding your business model, and not just when you start the business, but an ongoing basis, is extremely, extremely important. You also want to use this business model and look at those components and say, where am I maximizing value and where am I experiencing constraints? But most importantly, where do I need to make changes? What do I need to do differently? You also want to think about, what other companies, what partners out there that you admire or that are doing better than you and you want to be better than them, learn from them. This idea that entrepreneurs are consistently working with their head down is probably true, but is not the way to go. You want to be consistently looking and working in the business while also looking externally at trends, at competitors, at partners, and as I said, talking to your customers so that you are consistently learning on how to grow the business. And that business model, as I mentioned before, that canvas is not just important to be able to manage what is not working and managing constraints, but also understanding, what do I need to drive home? Where do I need to increase and allocate more resources because it's working? And then ultimately say, will these decisions get me to scale? But that's what investors care about. They care about the fact that you, as a CEO of a company of one or a company of 1,000, can literally make these complex decisions on a regular basis and continue to drive value and bring value into the company. So it's not as hard as you think it is, and it's not as challenging as you think it is. What's important is that you spend your mind share on the right things. And as an investor, what I care about most is not just the numbers and how you've calculated them, but what are the decisions behind those numbers that I can have faith in you and your decisions that you're going to drive value for this business. I hope this has been helpful to you, and I wish each and every one of you much luck and success in growing and scaling your business. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Teresa Snetzer. I'm the Vice President for National Security Programs at Salesforce. First, I'd like to thank AWS for hosting this wonderful event and for the opportunity to meet you all virtually. And second, I appreciate the opportunity to share my experience and background, and hopefully it's useful to you. So what I'd like to do is quickly go over my background just for context and some of my experience throughout my career. And then I want to talk about innovation and the topic of innovation, which I think is really relevant to startups today. And then we'll talk about the barriers to public sector business, some of the benefits of partners, and finally, I'll close with some advice based on my experience. Sound good? Okay, so in many ways, your life stories are driven by decisions that you make. I'd like to tell you about 5 decisions in my life that have made me who I am. The first decision was to major in chemical engineering. I grew up in a really small rural town in central Illinois. My dad was a professor of veterinary medicine at University of Illinois, so that's where I went to college. I started in zoology and then went to chemistry before deciding chemical engineering was for me, and turned out to be the perfect background for what was a career of innovation, problem solving with a strong technical foundation. So I worked for a few years and then went back to graduate school at the University of Texas in chemical engineering. Great degree program, but as important, serendipitously, I fell in love with Austin, and that's where I live today. The second decision that I made was to join the public sector and CIA more specifically. I worked in industry after undergrad for a couple of years in a traditional engineering job and quickly found it to be uninteresting to me. And I wanted to move to the East Coast. So a friend suggested applying to CIA. To be honest, I thought it was a weird decision to work for the government, but I thought, well, I'll give it a whirl and see what happens. Well, within months of taking the job, I was absolutely hooked. I loved working intelligence, the problem-solving nature of it, the smart people, the incredible tools and capabilities. And more importantly, I figured out that the work I did had impact. So for me, it was just a perfect fit. And I worked there many years in many different capacities, got married, had 2 kids, and then decided one of my kids was having trouble in school. So I decided to quit. I always thought I'd come back, but I decided to quit. The next major decision was to become CEO of my own company. And when it turns out my daughter was just fine, she went on to get a degree in communications and is a senior account exec for a major international PR firm. But at the time, I was at the peak of my career as a member of the Senior Intelligence Service. And so moving to the private sector was a big decision. I found a school for my kids, I found a house, I found a job, and I quit. So while my daughter was fine, coincidentally, it was a great career move for me because I learned a lot about business in the public sector. I had 0 experience or courses in college in business or accounting or marketing or any of it. So I was like a sponge. So my job was essentially business development and business strategy. And I learned everything about contracts and acquisition and finance and project management. It was great. Our company was acquired by a big company. And that's when I decided to start my own business. My company's name was Jasma Consulting. And our whole premise was essentially management consulting and helping the intelligence community use data and technology more effectively. It certainly helped that it was not long after 9/11, so there was a big market for that, but it gave me the opportunity to work with a lot of startups and smaller companies and work with them to figure out how to bring their technology into government. And it really was sort of my passion for the rest of my career, which was that innovation market. And after a few years of growing the business, we were acquired by LMI, another great company, and I stayed there and ran their intelligence practice for a few years before quasi-retiring and moving back to Austin for the second time, where I started another company. And this was more of a consulting company. I did angel investing. I did boards of directors, boards of advisors. I helped companies who wanted to market in the IC figure out how best to approach the market. It was great. It was a great opportunity. I would note that all my pictures really drive my motivation, which is my kids, my family, my husband, my interests, and balance. So that at that point in my life, that was really important. The fourth major decision I made, which was return to government at CIA and be the director of digital futures in the newly created Directorate of Digital Innovation. Our mission was to accelerate the identification and adoption of industry-leading digital technologies and processes, and then work internally to help organizations think about adoption of those technologies. It was an awesome job. I got to deal with industry and academia and venture capital firms and also help the organization think about technology. So after many years, I retired from government yet again and moved to Austin for the third and hopefully final time. And after taking some time off, I joined as Salesforce is the vice president for national security programs. Salesforce talks about digital trailblazers, which are really those customers that are blazing the trail, if you will, which really spoke to me in terms of all the things I've done over my career. And with a company in Salesforce whose values are customer first, trust, innovation, and equality, which really resonated with me as an individual. So that was really, this Salesforce opportunity has been really a rewarding culmination of many years in the commercial sector as well as in the public sector. Along the way, I have had 30 plus years in national security. I've learned a few things. The first thing I would note is the importance of identifying and leveraging mentors. I've had so many mentors over the years, both personally and professionally, that have helped me. I can't overestimate the value of those relationships. Secondly, be flexible and take risks. My career has been much more of a jungle gym, to quote Sheryl Sandberg, and lean in than a straight line. And so I've always looked for opportunities where I could learn something, make a difference, and also that the work was interesting. And so that's been my lesson learned. The third point I would make is nurture networks. And there are so many opportunities to collaborate with others informally that have helped me in my career, and where I've been able to help somebody where that's paid back many times over. I think this is particularly true for women based on my experience. So even though you're tired and you really want to go home at the end of the day, sometimes going to that happy hour really can rejuvenate you and give you the opportunity to meet others that might be beneficial to you professionally. So I'd like to segue to business and my experience. And I raised this issue of innovation because I think it's really important, both for startups, but also the government is really, the public sector writ large is so focused on innovation these days that it's a quite relevant topic. But in some ways, innovation has become sort of meaningless. It's just everybody's innovative. So what does that really mean, right? So I like the definition on the left, which really focuses on motivations. It's improving efficiencies, effectiveness, or creating a competitive advantage. And that really, to me, speaks to the heart of what innovation is all about. I would also note, what are the skills of somebody that's innovative, right? And I love this definition. It's the combination of your creativity or your ability to see the art of the possible, your problem-solving skills combined with functional and or technical skills. And so think about the combination of those three and your ability to deliver innovation. There's some real challenges, though, with innovation, particularly in the public sector. You have to be really clear about your customers and making sure that you're thinking about them first, whether your company is a product or a services or both. Who are the customers ultimately? And how do you understand what their needs are? Very different than requirements, right? We're talking about what their challenges are and how they need to think about doing things differently. And is it more of a requirements-based need, or is it something that's a disruptive need because of some emergent technology around machine learning or quantum compute or blockchain? Be really clear about that. How do you test your idea? I'm a huge fan of Steve Blank and the lean startup methodology. Steve was the advisor of Eric Ries, and so has developed a whole methodology around hacking for defense, and he teaches innovation courses at Stanford. And he has this idea of a one-page mission model canvas to really force you to focus on what is your business? Who are your customers? What is the impact? How do you demonstrate it? Steve's isn't the only methodology by any stretch. Some critics would say, well, customers don't know what they want, right? Which there's an element of truth to that with disruptive technologies. But I find Steve's rigor and approach to be really, really powerful in teaching you to focus on what end game are you trying to get to. The competitive landscape. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to companies or individuals over the course of my career. And when I ask them, who's your competition? And they say, oh, we don't have any, we're one of a kind. And that always makes me cringe because whether it's deserved or not, it sounds very naive. Everybody has competition. It may not be exactly what you're talking about, but I think you're better off identifying 2 or 3 companies and describing what they do and how what you're doing is different than saying, we don't really have any competition. Lastly, one of the innovation challenges, which I'll come back to, is how do you sell your idea to partners? In the public sector in particular, partners are key. And so you have to think about partners as customers as well as the ultimate customers, because what's in it for them? Why would they help you? What's the mutual value proposition? So those are some things that I would think about as you move forward with your idea. So let's assume you've got a great example of a startup, you've got a business plan, you've decided whether it's services or products, you've tested the market, you have a really solid team to work with you. Now the question is, your readiness to enter the public sector market, right? There's some formidable challenges. First of all, getting access to those customers and engaging them. In my world, which is all classified work, the security clearance barriers tend to be significant. But more than that, I think it's human nature to think, well, I want to talk to the CIO, or I want to talk to the chief data officer or the chief operating officer. But in my experience, it's usually one level down that are really the program managers, the decision makers that own the resources. How do you identify who those people are? Because they're probably the ones that you need to be dealing with. Secondly, some programs in the public sector really do involve making sure the trains run on time. The government needs a lot of people that just deliver services. And so those folks may not be as interested in innovation or disruptive technologies. Furthermore, I think some people are naturally more disruptive and innovative than others. So not only do you want the next level down, but you also want to understand and identify those who are capable of seeing the future, who have that creativity, and who are excited by the prospect of innovating. So those are some things to think about. Developing awareness of use cases. So, I make the distinction between requirements, where you're trying to essentially build requirements, get them all together, make sure everybody's coordinated, and then go out to industry to find a capability, versus disruption, which is there's a challenge in how a customer works, and you have a solution or approach that's going to address that challenge. Those are very different types of approaches to use cases. Regardless, you need to understand what those use cases are and help educate customers, not market to them, about how your approach, your solution, your services can help address those challenges. The third barrier I would highlight is navigating security and compliance barriers, and this is non-trivial. So security in my world, where you have to have security clearances, is obviously a barrier in and of itself. But if you have a technical business where the government's data is going to be stored in your cloud-based solution, you need to be FedRAMP compliant. Well, what does that mean? And how do you make sure you think about setting up for success in a FedRAMP sense? You have to think about things like foreign ownership and your supply chain. And those issues are really important in the public sector. So making sure you're conscious of what those requirements are and thinking about how you operationalize your business are really important. The latest one is a cyber maturity model certification. So how do you think about your cyber maturity and whether you can meet those requirements? Those are all things that you've got to think about. And interestingly, I've seen companies that have tried one extreme or the other, right? They've gone to lawyers, they've spent enormous amounts of time and money making sure they comply with every possible regulation and law, only to look up in time to go to market and realize they've burnt through all their money, right? Or at the other extreme, my idea is so good, they'll want it regardless. Well, the reality is you have to navigate in between approach where that's pragmatic, right? You've got to be conscious of the compliance and security barriers and consciously think about it, but you also have to do sort of just-in-time product testing or services testing to make sure that you're on track. So that's just some thoughts about how to manage that particular barrier. Last but not least is the famous acquisition process, right? There's a whole language around acquisition, whether it's a request for information or a market survey or request for proposal. You know, you have to get familiar with that terminology. You have to register to do business with the government. Have to think about pricing. Pricing is non-trivial because you have to be able to show pricing competitiveness and comparison and the basis of pricing. Perhaps most aggravating is there's a very long sales cycle. So even when you have a government or public sector customer that says, I want to buy what you have, it can take months, if not longer, to get through that process. So you have to kind of think about that when you plan for doing business in the public sector. For me personally, what I did is I found an expert who I knew from a previous company who had gone off on her own as an independent advisor for contracting and acquisitions. And I hired her on retainer to help me with the first few contracts to make sure I didn't make any mistakes. And in a cost-effective way, right? It was just one person and her company rather than some big firm. And that worked for me at the time. And then until I got enough momentum where I could hire my own person down the road. So all of the challenges I just highlighted can be addressed by leveraging partners. And, you know, I really have to emphasize that partners, particularly for startup companies, are critical. You know, whether it's an AWS or a Salesforce or a classic SI, those partners can really work with you to mitigate a lot of or help address the barriers that I discussed on the previous slide. They can help with the policy process and technical aspects of delivering a service, but as importantly, they can help you with cultural barriers. In my experience, it's those cultural barriers that are really hard to discern if you don't understand the customer's mission, that can really derail the value of what you're trying to do. So that's something that partners are really good at. They can help support product development and evolution. So I've known of companies that had a great idea, they had some interest out of the public sector, and then they proceeded to spend a fair amount of money to engineer tweaking that product to accommodate that use case, only to figure out that the addressable market was really small and they should have stayed on the path that they were on in terms of product development. So partners can help you, especially companies like AWS or Salesforce, with that product development and evolution to make sure that you're keeping your eye on the long game and really going after that addressable market. Again, facilitating customer engagement and use case awareness. If partners already have those relationships, that can really cut a lot of time out of your cycle by helping to introduce you to the right people or understanding those use cases from the beginning so that you can tailor your education capabilities and briefings to their particular mission use case or challenge area. Last but not least, partners can help you expand your ecosystem to really collaborate. There was one company I can recall in particular that had an awesome capability, but it was something that needed to fit into a bigger picture. And I found myself thinking through the course of their briefing, what would I do with this? Where would I put it? How would I make it easy to consume this technology or capability? And for me, it was really a showstopper, right? Whereas had that company really thought about, all right, so this needs to be part of the system. What companies do I want to collaborate with whether it's a partner or other smaller companies, to be able to deliver an easy to consume capability and not just a cool one-off technology. Whether it's Amazon, who has through the marketplace and other relationships, or Salesforce or others, it's really important to think about that idea of how consumable your product is and how easy it is for the customer, because otherwise you could run the risk of selling something interesting, but there's nowhere to take it. Where do you go if it's successful? So I want to spend a few minutes on this sort of summary slide or idea. I'm quite conscious of the fact that my advice could be, or my information so far could be negative, very, very negative. The barriers are too difficult, it's too expensive, there are too many uncertainties. But I will tell you, I definitely think that the public sector business is worthwhile. And there are multiple reasons why I think that. First and foremost, I think the government or public sector gives you the opportunity to make a difference and make an impact. I've always said, if you can make a difference and make money and do something that really interests you, that's nirvana. So I think in the public sector, it's not just the money motivation, although that's obviously important. It's the ability to make the government better and make people's lives better. So I wouldn't underestimate that as a motivation. The second point I would make about working with the public sector is if you're successful and you get a toehold or a foothold in the public sector and you do a really good job, it can be a really wonderful business. You can expand your offering, you can expand your capabilities. It becomes a rewarding year-over-year recurring revenue-based business, as opposed to the commercial sector where a company could just decide to pivot and terminate your contract, not because of you, but because they've just decided to pursue a different direction. So I think assuming you're successful, you can really build a nice long-term recurring revenue business and more importantly, a relationship. And that's how I've seen companies really succeed, is by building that relationship. The third benefit I would highlight is while the government security process writ large, certainly in my world, in intelligence, is very demanding in terms of security and security requirements and the capabilities that you have to have. Ultimately, at the other end, it makes your products so much better because you're so much more marketable to other sectors, because you can point to the hardening you've done from a security perspective as a feature that's time tested, if you will. And so a lot of companies are forced to make decisions that are cost-based. So I'm going to do the bare minimum with security just to make sure that we're effective, but I'm not going to really invest a lot of money in it because it's expensive, only to then have some sort of a breach. So I feel like that's another really positive reason for companies to get into the public sector business. I've seen companies start and only focus on the public sector and maybe later go into the commercial sector. I've seen it the other way. They've got a certain business that they've nurtured and grown in the commercial sector, and now they want to build a public sector business. There's no right or wrong. There are pros and cons of both, but I definitely think that it's something that's a worthwhile pursuit based on my experience. What I would say, though, is you really have to focus up front on what customer segment you're trying to go after. Is your service or product more data science, data engineering? Is it more about analysis, which has broad applicability to multiple public sector missions? Is it a support service, how to make things better or more efficient? Or is it IT modernization, how to think about bringing in innovation and new IT capabilities more effectively? Be really clear about what segment of the customer that you're going after. And then closely related. What's the relevance? How are you going to solve a problem or challenge that the government customer has? And how can you educate them to see that you offer something that they really need, even if they don't know it, right? So my second sort of closing piece of advice would be to really utilize partners. You can spend a lot of money with really potentially expensive missteps by pursuing what you think is a logical and reasonable path, only to discover that's not useful to the public sector market. Partners can help you navigate that and manage doing just enough, but still being compliant with what the government requires. And so I really think partnership, especially in this day and age with so many emergent technologies, partnerships are really critical, in my view and my experience. It's very hard for a company to break into the IC by themselves without those relationships. Last but not least, and I should have maybe started with this, but I'm happy to end with it. You really have to think very clearly about what the values of your company are, and making sure you have a team with complementary, multidisciplinary skills and experience, but also that match your values. I mentioned Salesforce. It's all about trust, customer success, innovation, and equality. Those values aren't just a slogan on the wall. Those are things that we've operationalized through Salesforce. And you have to think about what your values are to make sure that you're hiring people that have aligned values. I've seen things go really badly where people had different values, different ideas, and it's resulted in unnecessary conflict. So with that, I'd love to be able to engage you all personally, but I can't do that in this forum. What I would encourage you to do is feel free to reach out to me on my LinkedIn profile, Teresa Snetzer, and I love to network with people and help people. So if there's something I can do, I'd be happy to do that. Thank you so much, and enjoy the meetings. Bye-bye.
And welcome. We're so excited to have you at AWS Build Her, and I'm excited to be kicking off the last presentation of our event. My name is Layla Hay, and I am a business development manager on the worldwide public sector venture capital and startups team. My team exists to help public sector customers get access to AWS startups that solve their mission challenges and help startups engage in the public sector market. Prior to joining AWS, I was a business development partner at the VC firm Andreessen Horowitz. So if you couldn't tell already, I'm passionate about working with startup founders and helping them be successful. In the next 30 minutes, we're going to dive into the following topics. I'll provide an introduction to AWS. Then we'll talk about the public sector market opportunity, what that looks like for startups and specifically women-owned startups. And then we'll wrap up to talk more about how AWS can help you as a female entrepreneur on your journey. So first, I want to take a step back and talk about what AWS is, if anyone out there is wondering who we are and how we can help you. So let's start by defining cloud computing. The term cloud computing refers to the on-demand delivery of IT resources via the internet with pay-as-you-go pricing. So instead of buying, owning, and maintaining your own data centers and servers, organizations can acquire technology like compute power, storage, databases, and other services on an as-needed basis. It's similar to how consumers can flip a switch to turn on the lights in the home and the power company sends electricity. So with cloud computing, AWS maintains and manages the technology infrastructure in a secure environment, and businesses access these resources to develop and run their own applications. And as Sandy mentioned, AWS really does see itself as a startup too. In our case, after over a decade of building and running the highly scalable web application Amazon.com, which you're probably familiar with, the company realized it had developed a core competency in operating massive scale technology infrastructure and data centers. And we embarked on a much broader mission of serving a new customer segment and providing developers and businesses with a platform to build sophisticated, scalable applications using our technology. We are constantly innovating on behalf of our customers, and we now have more than 175 fully featured services with deep functionality. And one key thing to point out that I think is so important to note for startups watching is that every time we create a new service, all of our customers get access to that new capability. So that means a startup can be building on the same technology and the same set of services that our large customers can leverage. Customers like Netflix, Airbnb, and Coca-Cola. And I just love this fact because it really democratizes access to technology and gives startups and entrepreneurs like you access to services and features you need to build for your customers. So that's what AWS is at the high level. Now let's talk a bit about the benefits of cloud and what that means for you. So a core concept around the benefit of cloud is that the cloud allows you to focus on your business instead of your infrastructure. Now, we heard from Melissa Bradley earlier in today's event talking about the scalability of your company. As she said, it's not necessarily about how your company is going to get bigger and bigger. What it means is the ability to produce a greater output at a lower cost than before. This important concept for entrepreneurs aligns perfectly with how the AWS Cloud enables customers to grow and achieve that scale and achieve the operational effectiveness that Melissa also touched on. So let's dig into that a little bit. First, with the cloud, you replace upfront capital expenses with lower variable costs. So that means that programs and companies can get off the ground with much lower upfront costs. Sandy talked a little bit about that during her session. And in fact, the variable expense that customers incur is lower than virtually what any company could do on its own because AWS has such large scale. And we pass on the economies of scale that we experience to our customers in the form of lower prices. So AWS has actually lowered our prices 80 times since we launched in 2006. With AWS, you don't have to plan for or guess about capacity. You don't have to plan for the future and plan for what might happen. You just provision what you need. If you need more or less, your resources can instantly scale up and down as you need them to. AWS also helps you increase your speed and agility. With AWS, you can spin up resources that you need them. You can deploy literally hundreds or thousands of servers in minutes. This means that customers can very quickly develop and roll out new applications. And of course, this is key for startups. Startups disrupt and innovate by essentially trying something new. So with cloud computing, you can experiment at a small scale and iterate and deprovision servers if an experiment fails. No big deal. And all of this ultimately means that startups can focus on their core business value. As an entrepreneur, as a startup, you should be great at and focus on the service and product that you provide to your customers. You shouldn't be in the business of provisioning, operating and maintaining hardware servers. So by allowing AWS to oversee these tasks and provide those IT infrastructure services, you can invest more time and your limited resources into actually growing your business. And lastly, with AWS, you can go global in minutes. So we'll talk a bit more about this now. So this is the AWS global infrastructure. This is what allows AWS to deliver our services and capabilities. So AWS serves millions of active customers every month in 245 countries and territories. To support our customers, we maintain 24 physical regions on 6 continents. Each region is made up of a cluster of data centers known as availability zones. We are constantly growing our footprint. We have additional regions coming online in the next 12 to 18 months in Indonesia, Japan, Spain, and Switzerland. We also have a global network of AWS Edge locations, which can across 84 cities and 42 countries. Now, this reach is really important. And you might be thinking to yourself, how is this relevant to me if I'm a startup just getting off the ground? Well, it is important for a couple reasons. The first is you can replicate your infrastructure in any region in the world in minutes. So of course, as a startup, you're planning to grow, and the AWS global infrastructure can support you as you grow your business and expand geographically. At the same time, data stays in the region that you place it in, and AWS does not access or move your data unless you tell us to. Now, this is really important for countries where data sovereignty is essential for doing business, and that can be of particular importance in the public sector market. So that is a key component of our global infrastructure. You can also architect your applications to span availability zones and regions, and that enables you to increase availability and provide great performance for your users across the globe. So now that you have a better understanding about what cloud computing is, what AWS is, and how we can support you, let's talk a little bit about the public sector market and what that means at AWS. So first, I want to define what that means at AWS. Our public sector is a bit unusual in its configuration, and it has a far broader meaning here than just government. Our worldwide public sector business covers all levels of government, national, regional, and local. So here in the US, that is federal, state, and local government. Education institutions at all levels, from early stage through universities and adult continuing education, and the tech companies that support them. Nonprofits, NGOs, and the companies that serve those nonprofits. Healthcare, which encompasses public sector healthcare organizations around the world, and aerospace and satellite solutions. Now, let's talk a little bit about the innovation that's happening in the public sector. The global pandemic has put increasing pressure on public sector organizations, and especially governments, to step up their efforts and leverage technology to deliver citizen services. Here at AWS, we have seen an incredible acceleration in the adoption of cloud technology by our public sector customers. So here are just a couple examples. The Census Bureau. So the Census Bureau here in the US worked with AWS to allow citizens to participate in the decennial count online for the first time in history. The Census Bureau moved its 2020 census.gov website to the AWS Gov Cloud, which is our dedicated region designed to host sensitive data and address the most stringent US government security and compliance requirements. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. The Rhode Island Department of Labor and Training saw a tremendous spike in call volumes with citizens filing for unemployment benefits at the start of the pandemic. They replaced their legacy on-premise voice systems with Amazon Connect, our cloud contact center solution. This move to a modern digital contact center system enabled the Rhode Island DLT to increase their call capacity significantly. They went from being able to take 74 calls at a time to 1,000 calls per minute. And they integrated the system with other key services to improve their workflow and productivity to serve their citizens better. The government of Canada moved very quickly to build secure, compliant solutions on AWS to deliver critical information and services to its citizens during the COVID-19 pandemic. The Canadian Public Health Agency was able to develop and launch their COVID-19 situational awareness dashboard on AWS in just 4 days. And the Canadian Digital Service leveraged AWS to scale its Notify system, which allows government departments to send notifications directly to its citizens. Now, these are just a couple of examples, and they all underline the agility and scalability that cloud infrastructure can provide, not just to startups, but to public sector organizations that are looking to move faster, be more efficient, and most importantly, deliver better services to their customers, which are us, they're the citizens that they serve. So now we'll talk about some of the dedicated innovation programs we're seeing in the public sector where startups can engage. Now, as we've said, many public sector organizations are moving to the cloud and looking to leverage modern technologies to achieve their missions. Startups are a key part of the innovation ecosystem, and many public sector organizations are standing up dedicated innovation programs to attract startups and make it easier for startups to engage and do business with them, either with a particular agency or a group of agencies. There are also lots of innovation funding programs out there to explore. And these are particularly interesting for startups because they provide non-dilutive funding. So now let's talk a little bit about some of these organizations and what they do. These are just a few examples. So I'll start with the Defense Innovation Unit, or DIU. They are a DoD organization focused on accelerating the adoption of commercial technology in the military and national security. They leverage a contracting authority called an OTA, or Other Transaction Authority. These OTs are not subject to the federal laws and regulations that apply to government procurement contracts because they're considered contracts for research and prototyping purposes. So the unique nature of these contracts allow them to engage with commercial companies like startups and award prototyping contracts in 2 to 3 months instead of the usual 18-month cycle. And before you think to yourself, prototyping, how good could that be? Well, each military service has the authority to execute OTs up to $100 million each. So this is an incredibly useful route to market if your company has applications in the defense or national security space. Now we'll talk a little bit about innovation and research funding. So the SBIR and STTR programs stand for Small Business Innovation and Research and Small Business Technology Transfer. It is the US government's largest innovation investment program, worth about $4 billion annually. And it's an incredible resource to get non-dilutive funding and customer contracts for startups. There are 12 participating federal agencies, including the Department of Education, Health and Human Services, EPA, NSF, and the Department of Transportation. The program's goals are to stimulate technological innovation, meet federal research and development needs, increase private sector commercialization of innovation, and, important for this group here, encourage innovation and entrepreneurship by women. So we'll talk a bit more about the programs that can help you participate in SBIR programs in a little bit. And lastly, there are some great acceleration programs out there that exist specifically to help startups engage in their public sector journey. The ones listed here are ones we partner with at AWS, and there are many more out there as well that can really help you accelerate your success in this market. So now I'll share a bit more about opportunities for women-owned businesses in the public sector. All of these programs I'll mention now are at the federal level in the US, which is a big opportunity given the size of the US federal budget. I'll note that there are similar programs focused on supporting women-owned small businesses in many other countries of the world. So if you're based outside the US, I strongly encourage you to find the equivalent programs in your country. And if you are in the US and your product or service is relevant to state and local customers as well, many states have similar programs that you can engage with. So taking a step back, the US federal government's goal is to award at least 23% of all federal contracting dollars to small businesses total. Under that, the goal is to award 5% of contracting dollars to small, disadvantaged businesses each year, and 5% to women-owned small businesses. So the US federal budget for fiscal year 2020 was set at $4.79 trillion. And while these funding goals are their goals, as Sandy mentioned, there's a lot of work to do. Often these goals are not met. So this is a big opportunity as a female entrepreneur. I'll walk through a couple of these programs just to share some more details. All of these programs are managed by the US Small Business Administration, and there are great details about it on their website if you want to learn more. So first, the small SBA's, or Small Business Administration's 8A Business Development Program helps small, disadvantaged businesses compete for contract awards under multiple socioeconomic programs. Disadvantaged businesses in the 8A program can compete for set-aside and sole source contracts in the program and get support from business opportunity specialists who can help you navigate federal contracting and receive management and technical assistance. As a female entrepreneur, you can also participate in the WOSB federal contracting program. To get certified in this program, you have to be a small business, be at least 51% owned and controlled by women who are US citizens, and have women manage the day-to-day operations and long-term decision-making. It's also important to call out that you can compete for contracting awards under all of the socioeconomic programs that you qualify for. So you can certify as a WOSB and as a veteran-owned and service-disabled veteran-owned business if that applies to you. So it's a great idea to look into these programs for several reasons. Going back to the discussion about SBIR funding, one of the main goals of the SBIR program, which we just talked about, is to foster and encourage innovation and entrepreneurship by women and socially or economically disadvantaged persons. So if you certify in the programs that you qualify for, it will really help you as you pursue funding through SBIR. Certifying in these programs can also help you win business as a subcontractor. Many large government contracts aren't awarded directly to small businesses, but in those cases, the government requires the prime contractor to subcontract parts of the award out to small businesses. So these programs allow you to compete for those opportunities as well. So now we've covered a bit about the market opportunity in the public sector for startups and for women-owned startups in particular. I want to jump back in to talk about how AWS can help you on this public sector journey. So one of the most important things to convey upfront is that you don't have to do this alone. AWS has a broad set of partners that are focused on the public sector market opportunity specifically. Sandy talked a little bit about the AWS Partner Network, or APN. Broadly speaking, we have two different types of partners in the public sector and in the partner network more broadly. We have our consulting partners, which are professional services firms that help customers design, architect, and manage their workloads and applications on AWS. You can think of these like the traditional systems integrators. You probably recognize a lot of these logos like Deloitte, Accenture, and Booz Allen. We also have our APN technology partners. Our APN technology partners provide software solutions that are either hosted on or integrate with the AWS platform. You can think of these like traditional independent software vendors or ISVs. Now, this is important for two reasons. The first is that you can leverage the APN to find the right partner to help you on your public sector go-to-market journey. Our APN partners have deep relationships with public sector customers, and they often own the contract vehicles and the contracts that allow you to engage with those public sector customers. You can also join the APN and become part of our partner network, and that gets you a lot of additional support and benefits as well. And now I want to talk a bit about security. Security is a top priority for public sector organizations. So as a startup, if you're thinking about selling to the public sector and engaging in this market, the security of your product and solution will be critical. Luckily, security is another area where AWS can really help you as a startup company. AWS uses the same secure hardware and software to build and operate each of our regions. So all of our customers benefit from the only commercial cloud that has had its service offerings and associated supply chain vetted and accepted as secure enough for our top secret workloads. We offer extensive security capabilities that underpin all of our services and support what you build on AWS through fine-grained controls. We support 90 security standards and have 230 security features and services. In addition, all AWS services that store data offer the ability to encrypt that data. Now, I won't go into detail into all these certifications, but the key takeaway is that when you, as a startup, seek to get your capability accredited, you can leverage these controls by reference. This allows you to focus on accrediting your product and not the underlying components of the AWS cloud, because they're already fully accredited. This eases the overall process and can accelerate your path to ATO or authority to operate, and ultimately get your product to your customers faster. And I'll touch quickly on the AWS GovCloud, which I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the Census Bureau. So our AWS GovCloud in the US is a region designed to host sensitive data, regulated workloads, and address the most stringent US government security and compliance requirements. The AWS GovCloud is operated by employees who are US citizens on US soil, and the GovCloud is only accessible to US entities. The GovCloud region can help you address compliance at every stage of the cloud journey. And while we see many government customers adopting the AWS GovCloud, including the Census Bureau, like I mentioned, NASA, the Department of Justice, and other state governments, we also see many industry customers and startup companies leveraging GovCloud because it helps those organizations meet the security and compliance requirements needed to engage with their public sector customers. So this is another route to market and way you can leverage AWS to engage in public sector. I'll also mention that there is an AWS marketplace within the AWS GovCloud region, which is a way that public sector customers can find, buy, and deploy software as a service and API products. So I hope this gives you a better understanding of why the public sector is an exciting market to explore as a startup and how AWS's technology and platform can help you engage more effectively. To wrap things up, I want to zoom out and talk about other areas where AWS can help you on your journey and how we help startups more broadly as well. So the AWS Startups team has access to some of the largest startup ecosystems in the world. For startups, we can help you connect and engage with these partners as it's appropriate for you and your organization and help you achieve that growth and scale. My team in particular really focuses on many of the touch points in the public sector market specifically when it comes to industry events, programs, incubators, and corporate and institutional connections as well. But it's more than just access in the startup community. We are deeply committed to working with and enabling startups to grow and thrive. To do this, AWS has multiple programs and mechanisms that provide the business, technical, operational support to startups wherever you are in your journey and lifecycle. Sandy mentioned a couple of these in her talk earlier today. Our AWS Activate program helps you get started on AWS with credits and business support. There are two ways to leverage AWS Activate: through the Founders Program for bootstrap startups, which you can apply for, and the Portfolio Program, which is how you receive credits through your investors or accelerator or incubator programs you participate in. Of course, we don't expect you to become an AWS expert overnight. There are lots of AWS training programs that can help you grow on AWS and understand AWS. And we also have AWS experts that help you as well. And as mentioned, specifically for the public sector, we have experts who can assist startups in the many challenging areas around security accreditation and contract bid and proposals. And then, of course, AWS has deep connections into customers across the public and commercial sectors that we can help you connect with. Our partners provide even more potential connection into the customers and partners that own the contracts and programs where you'd like to engage. As Sandy mentioned, we have programs like Think Big for Small Business that can help you become part of our AWS Partner Network and get access to sales referrals, co-selling opportunities, POC funding, and co-marketing with AWS. APN partners can also leverage the AWS Marketplace, which is a sales channel for ISVs and consulting partners to sell their solutions to AWS customers, and that includes public sector customers through the digital catalog. And with that, it's been great speaking with you today. I hope you have a better understanding about how exciting the public sector market opportunity is for startups, as well as how AWS can help you grow and scale your business. Please reach out if you have any questions at all. We look forward to connecting with you. And I'm very excited to transition to the final part of our Build Her programming, a fireside chat with Teresa Carlson, AWS's VP of Worldwide Public Sector, and Sandy Carter, our Worldwide Public Sector VP of Partners, Startups, and Programs. These two women are incredible role models for women everywhere, and I'm so excited to hear their conversation. So I'll turn it over to you, Sandy and Teresa.
Well, thank you again for joining us at AWS Build Her. We have heard valuable advice and experiences from so many amazing women today, and I hope that you've really enjoyed the day. But more importantly, I hope that you've taken away some actionable insight for your business. For our last session, I am so excited because I am joined by my boss, Teresa Carlson, who is the Vice President for Worldwide Public Sector and the Regulated Industries at AWS. You guys probably know that she actually started this business. So she is a startup founder herself for that public sector business at AWS. Thank you so much for joining me today, Teresa. I cannot wait to hear your insights.
Hi, thanks, Sandy. Thanks for doing this.
So as you know, our audience today includes women who lead their own startups, as well as some inspiring entrepreneurs too. And those folks are eager to start and grow their business as well in partnership with AWS. And nearly all the businesses here have been impacted by COVID, including those here in our audience. So I think I'm going to start the conversation there, Teresa. So for our first question, according to the September Bureau of Labor Statistics, they do a monthly job report, and they found that over 865,000 women exited the U.S. workforce between August and September of 2020. It's incredible. It's a figure that's 4 times higher than that for men during the same period. I would love to know your take on this and what Amazon is doing to prevent similar statistics.
Right. I know. I mean, isn't it astonishing? It really is. This pandemic has been challenging in so many ways. But I think the job losses have truly disproportionately affected women in the U.S. for sure more. We don't have all the statistics worldwide, but I'm guessing it's exactly the same globally. But particularly women within certain demographic areas, including young Latinos and Black women. And we can probably guess why women are so, they're impacted so heavily. And most of us, just it's simple economics that they have to generally be the care provider for their children or elderly parents. And that falls in their lap most of the time. And also the overall wage disparity that we know is affecting most women globally too. So if you compare it to two that are working and who's making the most money, a lot of times it comes down to the woman who may not be the more substantial wage earner, along with they are always the one generally taking care of the household with the children. So they look at, the cost end up outweighing the benefits for them with the secondary salary, so they go that direction. And I've also read a lot about how the full women are, again, right now, even if they have full-time jobs, they're still the ones picking up the slack. I saw 2 news reels over this just the last 2 days, and it's being talked about a lot across all the networks and social media. Also, I went back and asked at Amazon, I talked to our HR and I said, hey, can we look and see, are we having the same impact at Amazon? And the good news is for us that we are not seeing the same phenomena, but it's important for us to continue to watch that at AWS at this point. And we monitor this now kind of on a weekly continuous basis. And also, while we haven't examined why Amazon is not trending in the same way, deeply yet, Sandy, I suspect it's for multiple reasons, and we know that both because we're managing a business, that we have programs that do support working parents that have been affected. We've allowed them to do modified schedules with the closures of schools, make sure that the child care centers or adult care centers that are not always available now. But, just on a practical basis, we've kind of said, let's kind of have grace and flexibility with people during this time, all of our workers, men and women, because they need to be able to feel like it's okay. And we've been on numerous calls together, you and I, where, their children's, we have some sweet, my boys are older, but they come in and jump on their lap, or they come in the room, or the dog or cat's walking across the desk. And you have to have flexibility because people are in their homes, trying to cook, trying to take care of the house, trying to take care of the family. So you really do have to change how you think about your attitude during this time. But I do believe for us as female leaders, it's important that we continue to push all employers to ensure that they have the right tools for women when they need to work. And I think this pandemic is going to change the dialogue greatly, Sandy, from that.
Yeah, I agree, Teresa. In fact, right before we jumped on, my 2 dogs started barking. So I do love it that you as a leader, you lead by example, and you do have grace and empathy. So I love that very much. And part of also what we're seeing is as some members of the workforce are losing women, many of those women are also starting their own businesses. So I was just reading Harvard Business Review, Teresa, and they ran this interesting article in May about how women are leaving the workforce, but what they're doing is they're going and they're starting startups, right? And it helps them pare down their stress, enables their flexibility, helps them to do something that they're really passionate about. So I'd like to ask you, with all of these challenges brought on by COVID, there are opportunities like the one we just talked about. Can you please tell us just a little bit about the work AWS has been doing during the pandemic, and what are some of the trends you're seeing? And we would love to hear some of the pleasant surprises as well.
Yeah, I mean, for us, I think if I talk specifically, Sandy, a little bit about public sector and targeting government and education, I just got off of a World Economic Forum fireside chat on online education and why is it so important. And by the way, the number one thing we talked about is why it's still not happening in all places. Guess what? Access, right? Just access to broadband, to the technology. So we know that technology in COVID has played a huge role in companies, governments, individuals being able to maintain their workforce, the work environment. And for us, the pleasant surprise, I'll say, which they need to, in education and government, it's really sped up their innovation cycles. And I've talked about this a little bit before, but I would say in our business, we were already seeing companies and governments within the organizations that work with governments moving fast. So we're already seeing a good adoption curve. What this did was even accelerate it further. So I've shared in the last 5 or 6 months, we've seen as much adoption as we would have in the last 2 years. And that was on a pretty accelerated cycle already. So that's kind of one thing. And then the second thing is at no time, like I think that any of us have ever seen, people have tuned in numerous times during the day to listen to their government because they need to know the rules. They need to know, especially if you think about April and May, when there was really almost a lot of panic about what was COVID. Can I go out? Do I have to stay home? Where can I get tested? If I'm sick, what hospital beds are available? What if I needed a respirator? Can I go see my family? Where do I get support? How do I get unemployment benefits? So I would share that we at AWS kind of worked around the globe supporting governments starting in March. In Asia, we saw China, Asia, Europe, US, and Latin America. It kind of just went around the world. And for us, we saw our organizations moving fast. And a couple of things that happened, Sandy, is one, the technology that a lot of the governments were using to do these fast, quick cycles, they didn't have. So an example of that is a call center. We found that, when you, again, step back and think about citizens were interacting with their government and listening, then they needed a way to talk to those citizens and provide feedback. So we saw our Amazon Connect, which is our digital call center, come online very rapidly and still using it. And most of our customers have said we'll never go back. And what that basically does, if you think about a call center today, they have to go in, old school, they go in to a site, you see people put their headphones on, they do that work. Well, an Amazon call center, we can set it up in hours, not weeks and months. You can train them from wherever they are and get them going. And then another really great thing, as soon as you begin to take in that machine learning of those calls, from there, you can get the analytics required to start automating those calls. You also have analytics to say who's calling about what are their top questions. We can proactively answer some of those on a website or a chat window. So there's things that you can do that really speeds up what you're doing with those cycles. So I would say from everything like that to looking to work with states on how do they set up unemployment sites to pay citizens their payments when they were unemployed. And, you know, I will tell you, Sandy, one of the things that we saw a lot of was sustainable food supplies that a lot of people did not talk about, but the need for understanding where the food supplies were and getting them to the right place at the right time. So for us, I would share, I'm very pleased that we at Amazon took a step back during this time, and we've tried to make sure we work very closely with our Amazon.com partners on the retail side, so that when we were out talking to these governments, we made sure we didn't overwhelm them. They were already overwhelmed, and we wanted to understand how we could help them the most. And that was formulated in different ways for different countries. But as an example, in the UK, we worked with them. They were struggling getting the supplies from the hospitals for testing. So we worked with them on getting the test there. Once the tests were done, you know, working on the technology side to rapidly get the results of that. And the last thing I'll just share, Sandy, before we move on, we also did something called the Development Diagnostic Initiative. And that is where we gave $20 million to researchers, because we felt researchers are sometimes overlooked, especially smaller ones. So we funded researchers through dollars and grants and technology support to continue their research and share it around COVID. And we've gotten some amazing small companies and startups around doing the Developmental Diagnostic Initiative. So everybody on the webcast will hear more from us on that, but there's some really amazing results coming out of that. And the whole point is sharing and acceleration, moving fast, merging data, so you can get a combination of data like economic and health, so you can put that together and have more information rapidly to make decisions.
Well, I love those stories and examples, Teresa, because it really shows that what you're focused on is not just profit and growing revenue, but you have such a purposeful mission as well. And I think that's really important probably to everyone on the call. Many of the women startups have a big purpose-driven mission. One of the other ones that I want to add in is a female-owned startup that came out of sub-Sahara Africa, and it's called eWaterPay. And it's such a great story because we're seeing a lot of women-owned startups enter into the IoT market. And so eWaterPay, this female-owned startup, is a prepayment system for water, for getting clean water into Africa. They leverage IoT, mobile money, and cloud-based data analytics, and they have really helped communities get water where they need it. And these women startups are just having such an impact. And that's one reason, Teresa, why you and I collaborated on a new program called Think Big for Small Business. It's one of our favorites, I know, because it is a program focused on minority-owned, women-owned, Black-owned, veteran-owned businesses. And one of the examples I just heard about this morning is a company called a DLZP, and they are a boutique cloud consulting partner. They are a women-owned and minority-owned business who leverage that program around migration, another great topic for us, to really drive some change in education. So I love the fact that everything you talked about was purpose-driven and very much focused on the audience we have today, these women-owned startups. So I'm gonna now switch over because it's, you are so inspiring to me, and I love all these real case studies that you show. You are an inspiring leader. You are the reason that I'm here in this business. So I would love for you to share with the audience a bit about your journey and what role you see women having in technology.
So, well, thank you for that, Sandy. And I feel blessed every day that I get to do the job, that I've earned the right, I should say, to do the job I do. Before I jump into that, I was just going to say, I do think there's a ton of female heroes during COVID. Everything from our frontline workers to amazing women who do have businesses that they are driving to help support this pandemic. So I want to thank all of them for doing that. And I've also just had the opportunity to work with some, public sector leaders during this period. The governor of Rhode Island, Governor Gina Raimondo, who, she's doing a lot to drive digital innovation within that state. And she's one of many, but that has been really exciting for me to see female leaders in the public sector, because we need more of that too. We need more leaders driving policy. And I know one day we are going to have a female president here in the United States for sure. They've already had them around the world, and we know those senior female leaders globally. There were a few articles that came out how their countries were ahead in what they were doing with the pandemic. So they're still looking into that research. Why were the female leaders of these countries? Why did they do better? And I also just wanted to share that I think for all the female founders and leaders out there, it's really important for us to share these best practices and have these networks where you can call each other up if you have a question and teach each other and learn from each other, kind of a co-mentoring relationship. So I hope, Sandy, everyone, we can continue that kind of circle that we need to be doing as female leaders and entrepreneurs. And so I'll go back now to just a little bit about my business. First of all, I've been so honored to be at AWS I'll be going on my 11th year in December, which has gone so fast. And I was at Microsoft 10 years before that, where I ran our federal government business for part of that time. But here at AWS, it will most certainly be the highlight, I think, of my career. I'm at the far end, not the front end, for all those young women who are beginning careers. I'm doing a lot of reflecting now on my past 22 years of working in technology. But I think that here has been such an important inflection point for technology, and I have gotten to see that at a bird's eye view every day for the last 10 plus years now. And when I started in 2010, I had two people. Some of you have heard this story. I had a solution architect and a sales account executive and myself. And we were very scrappy. We did everything from create our own PowerPoints to do real estate, set up contracting in the early days till we got everybody hired. And we had to convince all those individuals in government, because that's where we started with the US federal government, that cloud was a real thing, and oh, guess what? They could use it and it was safe. In the early days, we couldn't get through anything because the first thing we got, Sandy, was, well, this cloud thing is not safe, so we can't use it. So we had to earn trust. We had to listen a lot to our customers, be very patient, and make sure that we answered all their questions. And that's how we act today with our, it's original, it's real. We work backwards from our customers, and we make sure that we are listening to those customers and inventing on behalf of them. And I love that about us. And again, fast forward, I look now around the world, and Sandy, you highlighted a few of the companies, but the solutions that we've been driving with customers is kind of unbelievable. And we always said that we would pave the way for disruptive innovation and make the world a better place. And I would tell you, I think that's what we've been able to do. And if, again, moving from 2 people, no customers, to today, we have thousands of customers in my business, and Amazon has millions worldwide. I have hundreds of thousands across Amazon, millions, and we're in 180 countries right now with our customers, and we have teams on the ground in 37 countries. So I would say it's been really fun for me to build. It's been hard, but nothing worth doing is not hard. the results are there. And I have an amazing set of leaders like Sandy that work for me that are diverse. And I want to continue myself on that journey of making sure my organization has a high level of diversity. So that's important. But Sandy, it's been an honor. And like I said, I've just snapped my finger. It's gone by so fast. And I've loved every minute, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
And, you know, Teresa, one of my favorite quotes is, if you can see it, you can be it. And I love the fact that you've been such a role model and example for others, starting at the very early days. And I love the fact that you and I also work with a lot of female founders. Let's take Elizabeth Gore, who's the CEO of Hello Alice. They're the first 100% virtual accelerated for businesses, and they've been using machine learning, believe it or not, as a startup to help match a lot of the female founders, Black-owned founders, brown-owned founders to the right path. So whether it's some sort of resource they need or funding, they've really been working through that. So I love the fact that, you know, what you started has now gone to all these female founders today. And of course, you know, before I came here, I had my own little startup too. So it is really important that that we do continue to work with female founders. Now, I know that you just made an announcement about some work you're doing in Bahrain. Do you want to bring that up around early stage women founded technology as well?
Yeah. In fact, Cindy, I'll go forward. I went to the Middle East for the first time in 2014. And we were one of the very earliest groups at Amazon to go into the Middle East. And back then, believe it or not, it was really hard. Bahrain was the first country. I got into Saudi, which took a while because they didn't have a visa process. But we had seen that the Middle East was a place that we felt we needed to be with a cloud region. We weren't sure at the time the right place to go first, but we started working with Bahrain, which is a really small country in the Gulf, but very forward-leaning in their thinking. The Crown Prince there has always said he doesn't have the oil. He's not an oil-rich nation, so he has to innovate. And so I love that. I met him, and immediately he understood digital. And he looked, I'll never forget, he looked at his ministers and said, we need to be driving this country to digital innovation. And it just, my heart was like, this is great. I found somebody here that gets this. So the small country, they jumped in with us. They have been so business friendly, and we launched our first AWS Cloud region in the Middle East with Bahrain. Now it's been about 14 months ago, I think, 14 to 16 months ago. And the women, I have learned that the women of the Middle East and the Gulf are amazing. I tell them they're smart and beautiful and so gracious. And the thing that struck me so interesting there, Cindy, is that 60% plus of the technology workers doing the hardest jobs are women. So they go to school, they get themselves educated, they're coders, they're developers, they're engineers, they're security conscious in what they're doing. And as a result, when I'm there, I always tell the women, you come to the front, like we were talking. And now when I show up, they all are sitting in the front. It just makes me feel really good. So we want the women of the Middle East and the Gulf to do what we do, what we just talked about. Have that circle of female or other executive leaders that they can look to as they create businesses. And Bahrain has a program called Startup Bahrain, where they've created accelerators. They have a fintech. We've had a cloud innovation center there with a couple of the universities. But we are doing a program now with Halcyon and Kate Goodall. We're bringing 30 Bahrain female entrepreneurs. I say bring them. It's all going to be virtual for now. And we're doing a cohort with them of women, leaders, and entrepreneurs. And they're going to be able to work with some of the most amazing people. This is going to be in the Washington, D.C. area, but anybody who'd like to get involved, tell me. We'll get you now virtually with them. But it's about teaching, training, mentoring, helping support them on how they raise capital, how they get their company off the ground, and then again, creating that support structure for them. So we're really very excited about that. And I hope it will be this will be the first that we do with them, I think, and then we'll with Halcyon for female entrepreneurs, and then we may do it more. If we like the results, we'll do some more.
Yeah, that's really cool. I was so excited when we announced that. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, Teresa, I've got one more question. I could stay with you here all day, but I've got one more question for you. I know a lot of the women here are looking for important lessons, like lessons that you've learned along the way, advice that they could potentially take from you and then, accelerate what they're doing. So I would love to know, what advice would you give all these great women entrepreneurs in the audience today? What would be that advice that you would leave them with?
Well, I would say, Sandy, I get to meet some of the most amazing women and watch them, but what I would say is lead with confidence and really give yourself the credit for what you bring to the table. Selling yourself short, not an option. Focusing on your competitors means less of a focus on your customers, really. That's a big one for the female entrepreneurs. I promise you, if you work backwards from your customers, you're going to grow. One of the things I always found really interesting in my early days here at Amazon, Jeff Bezos did a roundtable with some of the executives, and he said something that has stuck with me all these years. When he was asked, how did you think about your business when you first started it? And he said, well, I never saw a customer that wanted higher prices, bad service, and slow delivery. So he said, for us, it was about the customer. How did we make sure we had lower prices, fast service, and fantastic customer service? Delivery, fast delivery, and fast, focused customer service. And I thought about that so much, and it applies to almost any business you have. If you look at the basics of what you need to deliver and kind of work back, because in the early days, I'm sure even for Amazon, doing that was easier because you didn't have a deep focus in retail. Today, if you look at what we've had to do to innovate, to do fast delivery from 2 days to 1 day to 1 hour, drone delivery, how we interact with our customers, pricing. So those things, they become more, you have to continue to look around corners and know what you should be doing to continue to innovate. So it's not about one and done. It's constantly asking yourself, what more can we do? The other area I would say, Sandy, is embrace failure. You have to, no one is successful without failures. And I think women, we beat ourselves up a lot because we do not like to fail. We're amazing multitaskers. So building that muscle, but learning from it, I think is really important, and stepping up to it and just saying, okay, I learned that once. I'm not going to make that mistake again. I just learn from it. My dad used to say, I didn't make the same mistakes as my sister. He was 8 years older than me, because I watched everything she did, and I was like, I'm not doing that. So you can also learn from watching others, I think. And also, set ambitious but attainable goals that connect directly to the needs of your customers, again, working backwards. And you can always keep raising the bar on that. I would say, we have a leadership principle here on hire and develop the best. And I found, for me personally, for scale, I always know if I feel like I'm off balance or I'm not where I should be. If I step back, Sandy, I always feel like I need to do some more hiring and developing of my people, because if your people aren't operating at scale with you, that's a real challenge. So you really have to make sure as leaders that you're making sure your leadership team is operating off of that as well. And so I'm an optimist. I'm a true optimist. I do try to find the good in what we can do and build on things versus everything that goes bad. And so for me, I guess one of the good and highlighting points for today is that I'm really encouraged to see that finally we have record growth in investments by venture capital and startups founded by women. And you're seeing lots of women now, Melinda Gates, others doing amazing work in this space. Halcyon, this group that I talked to you about, they have a startup fund just for female founders. So a lot more people are focusing and saying, okay, we got to step back and make sure we're really looking at female leaders and what they bring to the table. So, and then we need to, that's not enough. We need to continue to increase it faster for sure. And it's not just females, Sandy, I would say it's also diversity. I mean, we need diversity in our venture capital and because we need all kinds of founders. And I would just say maybe the last thing on that piece is we want to help. AWS has its own programs to navigate in public sector landscape. If you have solutions out there, you want to bid government work, we have a bid proposal and capture team. Sandy has our partner team. We help you on a flywheel approach with what you're doing. So many of our partners come to us now and want to do things around compliance, like FedRAMP and government. We have programs, so reach out to us and let's find a program. In fact, Sandy, because I said, Sandy, we gotta have a concierge service for our partners, has now started at the concierge service because we found so many of our partners they had questions. It's like our call center. Sandy, maybe we should use AWS Connect.
There you go.
Yeah. Our call center ourselves. But it's important that we are supporting our partners, and especially our female entrepreneurs, Sandy. But that's some of my advice, I would say, hopefully helpful.
Let me ask you one question. One of my favorite things that you say, Teresa, is don't just get a seat at the table, stay at the table. Do you want to talk about why you have that philosophy? I love that saying that you use.
Well, it's kind of what I say. I say, when you get a seat, take a seat, and when you get a seat, make sure you have a voice. And you want to stay there, never lose that seat. But I will share the one thing I found. You have to, when you get an opportunity to show up, have a voice, and use that voice for influence and impact. And sometimes I will see women show up because we are still underrepresented at the table, for sure. We're the minority at that table. And we are silent. We can be silent. And it's important and comfortable sometimes, but important to have that voice. A lot of the young women at Amazon, it's actually a top question I get, is how do I have the confidence to speak up and say something? And I've shared, look, often and still sometimes today, I get like, okay, I know I need to say this. Like, I have an opinion here and I need to voice it. And you just do it. And I think you do it as smartly and concisely as you can. But even in that, you're not always going to do it the way that you would like to have done it. And for most women, we always think we can do better. But I would say, take a seat, show up, get a seat, take a seat, have a voice, and stay there.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Teresa. I appreciate you sharing your insights and your advice. And I know everyone here today took away 1, 2, maybe 3 things and are definitely inspired for sure. Before everyone leaves, though, I do want to highlight some of the partner programs that Teresa mentioned and I mentioned. There is AWS Activate to help you get some credits to get going, and AWS Public Sector Startup Ramp, some programs that can just help you get that little extra kick. I also mentioned Think Big for Small Business, a program that both Teresa and I are very passionate about to help all of you really take advantage of some of those access that you need to APN services that you might not get unless you get a little bit of extra help. And finally, there are lots of teams at AWS. We have a public sector VC and startup team that's specifically eager to help you. And we want to support women entrepreneurs. Hopefully you took that away, because both Teresa and I are so passionate about it. One of the other things that she pointed out is you don't have to do everything alone. AWS is here to help you. We are on a mission to help empower women founders to solve the world's most pressing issues through technology. So I hope you've enjoyed all the content that we brought to you today. We want to learn from you too, so provide us your feedback. What can we do better next time? What did you love that you want us to continue? Thank you again for joining us here at AWS Build Her. And thank you, Teresa, for your great comments.
Thank you, Sandy. Thanks, everybody.